All right, it is noon, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. We had a really good event last Friday, the Remote Learning Summit. Our panelists were great. We had a great discussion on a lot of topics related to remote learning. As we mentioned then, we got so many questions from the audience related to different topics of remote learning or challenges that you're having. So we decided to kind of drag out Friday's event into this week. And so that's why we wanted to create a remote learning week where we can, have these kind of breakout sessions with each of our panelists to dive deeper into these kind of specific topics that you all wanted to learn about. So just to give you another overview of this week's schedule, today we're talking with Eric Guise to learn about digital equity and student engagement during remote learning. Tomorrow we'll be talking with Sean about communication, collaboration, and coaching tactics. Wednesday, we're talking with Sarah about teaching tactics. And Thursday, we will be talking with Melanie about technology tools to enable and enhance your remote learning environment. So without further ado, we'll jump into today's session. So today, as I mentioned, I'm joined by Eric Guise from Hopewell Valley Central High School. We're going to be talking about digital equity and student engagement during remote learning. So we received a ton of questions about both of these topics because I think they're top of mind for most teachers and tech coaches at the moment, as these become kind of larger challenges with the new environment. It's harder to monitor and overcome these two challenges that we're dealing with. So wanted to dive deeper into that with Eric. We had a great episode with Eric on our podcast, Tackling Tech, last week, and everyone feel free to check that out. Great episode on getting teachers to feel a little more comfortable with technology, both in the classroom and out of the classroom during remote learning. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We'll dive into some questions and get into this topic a little further. Hi, Eric. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We had a great conversation on Friday, so I'm excited to keep that going. So first to dive in, I want to kind of start with the digital equity questions and topic. I think a good place to start might be how did your school and just K-12 schools in general approach digital equity prior to remote learning?
Prior to remote learning, I think we just tried to push out what we can to our students, to our teachers. And usually it starts with some type of decision about technology, whether it's to implement one-to-one tools, whether it's to see what type of resources we could get into classrooms. Some districts are so huge that it's almost impossible to get a one-to-one program there. But if we put these resources into classrooms or have computer labs, then we'll be able to get these resources pushed out to our kids. And I'm speaking from a technology tool aspect here. To tackle digital equality, there are so many different facets to that, whether you're talking about the special education student, the social emotional kids, the English as a second language. I mean, there's a lot of areas that we could tackle here.
Would you say that those, inequities were more obvious when school was kind of in that physical classroom in that environment, or are they becoming more obvious now that remote learning is in play?
I think remote learning is opening so many people's eyes. The digital divide, that is just so huge. And the way that we're teaching our students now is going to change the way that we teach our students later. And I mean, it is obvious that we need to focus funds, resources. The government needs to take a look at certain programs to kind of close these gaps, close the digital divide, and help get all of our students on a level playing field.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a sentiment that was really obvious in the questions that we received. We received so many questions of, tech coaches and teachers asking, not all of the students in my class have equitable access, whether it be to devices if they don't have a one-to-one program or to internet access. So I think that's definitely something that's becoming way more obvious now than it ever has been. So I think another good place to start would be, now that we are in this remote environment, how do you and schools in general kind of keep a pulse on which students don't have equitable access to, devices or the internet, or maybe not all the resources that they need to get their work done? Is there a process in place?
I think schools are making their process. I think districts are data mining right now. They're trying to figure out who exactly has access to these ed tech tools that will allow for virtual learning, that will allow for learning at home. Even if it is a one-to-one district, we need to make sure that they have Wi-Fi access. But there are other ways that we can kind of address that portion of the issue. And that is, if we take a look at statistics, it shows that 20% of all 8-year-olds, and if you go up to a senior in high school, 18-year-olds, it's somewhere around 92%, all have smartphones or the use of cell phones. And when you look at that and you look at the parents that have it, at some point in time, within the day, the majority of our students are able to get onto these devices or are able to access information from their teachers to help them learn. Now, just because they have access, it doesn't mean that everything is equitable. After that, we get into another dimension of, divide. Whether teachers, if teachers are at home and they can access the kids, they could provide content and things like that. But if it is solely the educator is the parent, a lot of parents have not been in school for a long time. So the practices are different. And I kind of mentioned this last week, that I'm teaching my 5-year-old, I'm teaching him how to do multiplication. He loves math, and I'm trying to help him with basic things, and we're just doing tens right now. So the way that they learn now is different than the way I learned back then. So like I said, we just need to do a good job at data mining right now as a district. And that should be the first thing that we're doing. We're collecting data, and this data will be used later on, hopefully, to make educational decisions down the line.
That totally makes sense. Can you elaborate a little bit more on kind of the inequities with that parental access at home? I think maybe what resources are provided to students who don't have parents who are as engaged with, helping them get that hands-on learning, or kind of how parents can help their students if they are in that position to help them.
Well, I think it needs to be, the teachers have to keep the mindset that the parents don't know how to do it as well. They might know how to get an answer to something, but it might not be the best practice that we would teach in the classroom. So you could easily do this through Screencastify, who's offering their services, their premium services for free. There are many other tech companies out there that's doing the same thing, and I commend them all for that. It's awesome for educators and it's awesome for the students. But in a lesson, act as if the parent is there and they're going to help their kid, or some type of a guardian. All right, because more than likely you're going to be teaching both. The parent should pick up on it a little bit quicker than the student. In some cases, that may not be the case, or parents might be too busy keeping their family afloat to help out. So we need to keep these videos very, very short, but we all need to work together. We need to be direct. We need to be short and to the point, and we need to check in and make sure that we're reinforcing the learning and not doing too much at a time. We need to keep these chunks small.
We had a question from someone come in prior to this event asking how to assess students' learning, especially for younger students who have their parents correcting and working on work with them. How do you keep that assessment, I guess, kind of unbiased, if you even need to?
Yeah, for me, I mean, everyone's going to have their own take on this, but right now we just want to make sure that our students are getting exposed to quality content. I don't think the assessment scores really matter. If they did, we'd still have state assessments. They've all pretty much gone out the window. We're still having AP stuff that's modified and shortened up. But I think what's important right now is just to push out content, to make sure that the students are still seeing certain skills that they're going to need to apply in the future years. Just maybe not as much. And like I said, just specific and to the point. I think that's the way to go right now. Don't worry about the grades. You know, a second grade or third grader that gets an A during this quarter, that's great. But when we think 10 years down the road, is anyone going to remember this fourth quarter other than how different it was? They're not going to remember a grade. It's just going to be, hey, I remember when I had to stay in my house and work on work rather than going to school. That's going to be the main memory. So just try to keep it positive and just keep working at it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it brought up something that you touched on our podcast episode, which was, kind of doing away with those question answer types of questions and encouraging students to do passion projects, which I loved. That was one of my favorite quotes from that episode. So we kind of already touched on this, but we had a question come in from a tech integration specialist asking how to kind of facilitate remote learning when the students in one class all have different levels of remote access. So access to technology. Do you have any tips for kind of making it more equitable within one classroom?
One of the best ways is to use technology that works on all different types of platforms. So if you use something that's iOS specific, it's not going to help the Android user. If you use something that is Chrome specific, it might not work on the iPad the way that you think it's going to be. So when you think about those types of equities, I would just make sure that the tech tools that you're using are things that students have used in the past. So they use them either in your classroom, or if you did a blended learning or some type of remote learning activities before, you keep using those same platforms that they're comfortable with, but also that the tech tools are very diverse. It's not a country club of tech tools. That's what I like to call them. No one needs a membership. It's open to everybody. Everyone has equal opportunity, and it's there to support the students. So that's my big go-to tech-wise, is just make sure it's an open-faced tool.
It's a great tip. And then, so someone asked a question, how to promote meaningful and online remote instruction to families without any technology or cellular service, kind of the worst case scenario.
The worst case scenario, that is probably one that is going to be an ongoing struggle. I said this on Friday, that I have a teacher from my cul-de-sac that's sending 2 weeks worth of plans home via snail mail. I think that is very awesome of her. I think she is one of those teachers that's a go-getter that doesn't get stopped by many problems. But there are ways that we could do this. I mean, if we want to keep our bus drivers working and running routes, you could easily get your bus drivers to drop off some type of a care package at, certain students' doors. There could be ways that we could get creative and organize these types of things. For example, with our Chromebooks, anytime a Chromebook breaks or is having problems, students can fill out a help desk form. And if the tech people think that it needs to be looked at, they'll drop off another Chromebook and collect the Chromebook. So that's a creative way of doing this. And without the whole technology thing, I think we could also explore this space a little bit. Maybe see if there are programs out there that provide stamps for educators that will allow them to send home stuff. So if you're going to go that route, you want to make sure that you're sending for a couple weeks. Once again, it's based on creativity and not right and wrong answers. You want these students to be occupied through their passions. That's when you're going to get the best results. So, I mean, it's not the best answer, but we're still looking for it. If someone finds it, they'll be a multi-millionaire. So.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's ongoing, and it kind of brings us back to, the basics of education, how it functioned before technology, and figuring out how to make that work when we're not all in one place, which is the question of the year, it seems to be. So then I guess kind of to wrap up the digital equity section, what are some of the coaching tactics you've found? I'm assuming that this time especially with the digital divide becoming more apparent than ever, it's probably disheartening and very challenging for teachers to feel like they're giving that kind of equitable instruction to all of their students and feeling fulfilled that way. Can you give some tips on kind of maybe how you're coaching your teachers to really make the most of this time and make sure all students are getting that equitable instruction?
Yeah, my district's very lucky, or I feel very lucky to be in my district just because of the number of people that have contributed uh, to the professional development of virtual learning for teachers. First of all of us are trying to keep it positive. We're trying to show that, you know, we're doing a lot of good, and we start off our trainings that way. At least that's how I started off. And I like to provide examples of how far we've come from an individual teacher standpoint and for us as a whole. Some of the best practices for sharing out tools and different resources and strategies is just having a Google Meet. Some people use Zoom, some people use WebEx. There are several different platforms out there that you could do this and meet in real time. So I would encourage districts to find their technology leaders and really plan some virtual meetings if they haven't done that already, where tech teachers or anyone that's savvy in tech can show their skills and show best practices. We run 3 to 5 different sessions every couple of days. So if teachers want to drop in, learn about Pear Deck, they can. If teachers want to learn about Google Meet, how to use G Suite and exploit that a little bit. There are ways to be creative and use those, but really small chunked sessions that are specific to a certain type of instruction, I find work the best. And then what you want to do is you want to check in with these teachers, see how they're using it, and then you want to share it back out with the community. Because one, that's going to show that, hey, we are making progress and we're doing quality things in a, you know, unconventional situation. But two, it also sparks, hey, if that teacher could do it, so can I. Or that's a great idea. That's what I was looking for. Let me reach out to that person. And then all of a sudden, a person that, you know, is now tech comfortable and a skill is now your leader, is now providing assistance to somebody else. And that's how you develop that localized PLN or PLC or whatever you would like to call it, and grow together. So that's the best way, is just to, you know, start with a nucleus and then work your way out and try to impact as many people and inspire them to do great things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that will probably translate over once we all go back to, I guess, normality, or what it will be. But those teachers who have really discovered technology and come to love technology and kind of integrating that into their classrooms and being champions for it in the school level once this is over, which I think is really exciting and something we've heard from a lot of tech coaches. So then kind of transitioning into student engagement, when I was going through all of the questions that we received, these two topics really went hand in hand for me because, you know, it first starts with making sure students have the access to what they're going to be learning. And then it's kind of on the flip side, how do you make sure that students, you know, are engaging with these topics and the lessons and doing the work, and you're creating lessons that they really want to be a part of, and it doesn't feel like I'm sitting at home on my computer and I don't want to be learning. So we received a lot of great questions on this. I think this portion might be a little more Q&A because these are kind of more specific questions from the audience, but I want to start with what are the best strategies for encouraging students to do remote work during this time?
Yeah, I find that the best strategy is to kind of only use, I don't know, right and wrong answer type questions when you absolutely have to. And when you do use them as a formative assessment rather than a summative. Students are very stressed. Some of them have parents or guardians that are sick or away all the time, and they have to watch, you know, maybe younger kids. So stick away from that. Go with the more creative side. Do project-based learning, do claims evidence reasoning. Those are great ways of doing it. There's a site called Data Nuggets that gives them live data on different platforms. So if you want to study lizards, you could go out and find lizard population data that's actually real. So they're using real data. So data nuggets is a great way to incorporate data into those types of lessons. Get them to grasp anything that they're passionate about. I know a lot of people don't like the whole passion project scheme that is out there, but what I mean by that is just let them grab a hold of their interest and run with it. See what happens. If you're an English teacher and a kid likes cars, allow him to do something, some type of creative writing about cars. I mean, that's the simplest form of it. So I would say anything that has to do with passions, if they find a way to be distracted, you'll be amazed by the quality and the cleverness that they come up with within these projects.
Can you dive a little bit deeper into the passion project? I love the idea, but how can you, I guess, how can you encourage teachers to use that rather than the kind of the easier forms of assessment, which would be that Q&A, and then kind of get that to align with the goals of that kind of curriculum and class structure?
Yeah, so my take of the passion project is this is time when teachers were in their regular classrooms and say they meet 5 times a week for an hour, maybe on Friday for 20 minutes. Every Friday, they have 20 minutes to work on a passion project, something that interests them. And at the end of the year, they have to tie it back into curriculum. So if it's a world history project and someone's very interested in sports, well, maybe they're looking up all these facts and stuff about sports and when sports came about. And then at the end of the year, they loop it back into the curriculum. If it's US history and they want to talk about baseball, there's a tie there. It might be a deep stretch, but it's still students working towards something that they're interested in. And at the end, there's this share with the community type piece to it. I really think that that's what we need in these projects is a way of sharing at the end of this. Hey, this is what I've been working on. This is what I've learned. This is what I did. Now give me feedback or ask questions about it. And I think that's those types of ways are the best ways of, I don't know, educating our students at this time, because we're teaching them how to do research. We're teaching them how to make presentations, whether it's creating a model that has nothing to do with technology or creating some type of video through technology. We're giving them these skills that allow them to take their learning of the real world, because let's be honest, you're going to have to present in the real world. You're going to have to, deliver things to an audience in the real world. So let's use that. Let's develop those skills. And maybe later, we'll come back and really connect the dots in the content. Maybe next year, our 11th grade teachers can kind of wrap up the 10th grade year at the beginning, just, in a clever way. So I think.
Yeah, I love the idea. And one thing that stuck with me from Friday's event was, I think Sarah Margison said it, but students are in a learning environment now that is so unique from where they typically learn. And so the projects that they're doing around the house or cooking or, engaging in these different learning activities that might not be as normal to what we think are, learning activities, and kind of discovering those new interests and passions is so important. It's kind of a growth process, I think, for students during this time. So then we talked about encouraging students to do the work. Teacher asked, how can I increase student engagement with work? So whether that is, in the classroom via Zoom or Google Chat, or whether it is maybe online responding to assignments, how can we increase student engagement during this time?
So I think the big part of it is find something that they're passionate about, but let's move beyond that for a second. I believe it was Sarah again, or it might have been Melanie, or it could have been Sean. I think we all touched on it, but they're all awesome, by the way. Communication is key, and one big part of communication is feedback. There are tons of ways to give feedback out there, but realize that these students are going to be doing this work probably when it fits best for them. If they're watching their brother and sister in the morning and their afternoon is when they have time to do work, they're going to do work then. So it's important for teachers to find time as well to go back and give them little bits of feedback that, allows that flame to keep burning, that flame of learning to keep burning. So there's a new program, a new extension that I really like that I stumbled across last week for feedback, and it's called Mote, M-O-T-E. Go to the Google Chrome extension or Google Chrome store and download that extension. It works in Google Slides, Google Docs, and Google Sheets. And what it does is it allows you to make a comment, and then it will transcribe your comment in there. So they could listen to it via audio, or they can read the transcript of it. I think that's just huge because it personalizes the learning a little bit. Just to be able to hear your teacher's voice, that goes a long way with a student right now. A couple weeks ago, we sat down with a bunch of students, and the number one thing is they miss their teachers, they miss their friends, they miss socializing. So if this is the way that we could give back to them a little bit and let them know that we're checking in and showing them how they can continue their learning, I think that type of feedback is huge. So I would go there. I would say continue with the short screencasts with your whatever screencasting platform that you like. If you could do a morning message or a weekly recap or whatever it may be, I would say do that. We want to personalize their learning. That keeps them engaged, it keeps them going. So feedback through communication, I think all those are key. And then just using platforms that they're comfortable with. Let them show you what they can do. And if they want to go outside of those platforms, they'll learn it because that's something that interests them. So let them do that. But just keep all that together, think about it, reflect on it, and reflect with your students, and then just glorify their progress. Hey, I checked in with Johnny this week, and he's doing this awesome project that has to do with this, and he's using this type of model to do that. Janie over here, she's doing this. Let them know what each other's doing if they don't have the ability to communicate with one another, and just give that sense of community. I think all those are really big factors into this learning process.
Yeah, I think communication is key throughout all of this. I know even internally at Dyknow, we're all working remote, and I really look forward to getting those, weekly updates of what everyone is doing or getting feedback. It really helps to kind of know that you're on the right track and doing all the right things. And I think for students, especially, having that communication with teachers is so critical. You kind of already touched on this with the Mote tool, but we had a teacher ask, she's working digitally with her students for the first time. They're not used to using Chromebooks. So do you have some tips on how to solicit work from students who are not used to working on the Chromebooks or may have to learn these new technology tools for the first time?
There's another tool out there. It's called IORAD, IORAD. I think I shared that on Friday. That will allow teachers to make video directions, or if they want every click that they do on a web page or screen, it will show a picture of that and allow you to type whatever you want into there. So I think these little guides like that will help students and also their parents, because let's be honest, a lot of our parents are going to stay on top of their students. And if you could show them how to help their kid send something in, I think that's the best way. Once again, you could do screencast tutorials on how to do things. That would also work, but I would recommend IORAD.
That sounds like a good tool. So then also, since students aren't, in the classroom, you can't kind of keep tabs on them there. How do you, I guess, first identify students who may be struggling and then provide assistance and kind of guide those students with the remote learning process?
So I've heard of a lot of really interesting uses of forms and sheets from a lot of teachers. So there's one teacher that has a daily check-in. So basically it's 3 questions. It automatically collects their email, so they have that. But it asks, how are you doing? What's one thing that you struggled with? What's one thing that you feel, that you have accomplished over the last day or week or whatever it may be? I think that's a great way to just get a quick poll of what's going on there. And if the kids aren't even filling it out, there's probably a good sign that something's going on there, especially since we did have 5 months with our students prior to this. So we kind of know their work habits and their work ethic and, some of their ins and some of their outs. So I would say just find a tool that allows you to get quick information, and then check in with those students, or maybe communicate with the guidance counselor to see if they could check in with the students or if they know anything that's going on. I think these are all great strategies for that.
Definitely. Question came in of how to keep a record of attendance that could be saved automatically on Google Classroom. I know you are a Google school, so maybe you have some insight.
I am a Google school, but I am not a Google Classroom school.
Okay.
We have a different LMS, but once again, my phone just went off because I said the G word. But once again, you could use forms to easily take attendance every day if that's something that is important. But once again, I'm not sure how much attendance is going to tell us, other than maybe because every student's situation at home is really different, and we need to be mindful of that. So I would just probably use forms. There could be a better tool for Google Classroom, but I just don't use it. So
Yeah, totally makes sense. So yeah, Saima, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She just said in the chat she's keeping record in Google Sheets. So another question kind of about student accountability. As a middle school educator, it's challenging to get students to log on and participate. The ones who do are the ones who have always participated and completed assignments. The majority across all levels are MIA. Any suggestions or strategies for encouraging attendance and participation?
yeah, so I know that I know that time's limited. So I know phone calls home is tough. But if you could reach out to them that way and just get them on the phone, let them know that you care. It's like a virtual, you're putting an arm around their shoulder, a virtual hug. Just let them know that you're there and that you care. I think that's the best way of doing it. Don't try to make it as passive as possible. You don't want to somehow make them feel that, they're in trouble or anyway, because a lot of kids are going through tough situations. So I would just reach out, and that's probably the best way, is to get them on the phone, or once again, use your guidance department and see if they could help you out with this. If you have a lot of these students, I think that would be the best way, because more than likely, if they're not doing stuff or not communicating in your class, they're not communicating with other teachers as well.
That's a really good point. So we had a question come in via the Q&A on Zoom from Nicholas Johnson. He asks, what's your favorite G Suite app for equity and engagement? And maybe if you have one, could you give an example of how you use it?
First of all, Nick Johnson is my co-host of Got Tech, the podcast. So Nick, thanks for joining in. What is my favorite app to get engagement? I forget the question because you
for equity and engagement.
I would say Slides by far, or Google Sites. Those are my two go-tos. Slides is just so diverse in what you can do. It allows you to pretty much make anything. Ebooks, it makes a whole lot of things. Shameless plug, but we just dropped an episode yesterday on 40 different ways of being creative using G Suite. So go check that out. But I would check in there because we did many of those. I don't know, Nick, shame on you for the shameless plug, but you made me do it. So
we'll be sure to throw that link in when we post the recording so people can go check it out. So I guess those were kind of all the questions that we had. To wrap this up, though, I'm really interested in your take on, first of all, how this remote learning environment will change or improve maybe the discourse around digital equity when we go back to what will be normal when we go back.
Well, let me just say that I hope the right people are paying attention to the situation. I want to reach a virtual hug out to everybody that's struggling with the whole technology divide. I think really it should be an eye-opener, and it's a shame. I think we're doing a disservice as a country right now, just to allow the divide to get so great. Just some of the stories that I'm reading. I mean, I'm emotional right now. I am, because, you know, I think everybody deserves an education. And I think that's what makes America great, is that we do offer that, but I think we can do better. And I really think that we need to take a look at our data, our hard data. We have to get these to the right people, and there needs to be some type of educational reform. We need to focus on certain areas more than others, and we need to find a way to do that and do that quick, because let's be honest, our high school education is so valuable. And not only does it make those students better, but by making our students better, it makes our communities better. So I just really hope that the right people with the right motivation gets a hold of this and starts making big changes to help out students in areas that really need it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on that topic, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of comes in the future from this. In the same stroke, what would you say you might think would change with the way that we assess or engage students in the classroom after this remote learning?
This is something that I'm really, really excited about. I'm really excited that our teachers are getting skills. It's almost like this situation has forced our teachers to get uncomfortable, and then in order to get comfortable. And I keep saying that on everything, but I truly feel that, you know, this experience could be a blessing in disguise as far as getting our educational skills and taking those skills to the next level. And I think also because students are becoming more familiar with technology. I know that everyone thinks that students are digital natives. I think that's true when it comes to certain platforms. If you ask them a thing about YouTube, you got it. Instagram, you got it. TikTok, you got it. You ask them the in and outs of how to make an animated slides presentation, it's like deer in headlights sometimes. So I think this time is also going to improve student skills, which is going to develop their skills. So when they're ready to go to the real world, it's all there. So I'm excited. I really am.
Yeah, I think the sentiment on Friday especially seemed very positive in terms of where do we go from here. So I think it's really kind of maybe bringing out the best in most educators as to kind of what can be done with technology when we go back. Um, that was everything that we received as questions from our audience that we wanted to cover. It doesn't look like we have any more questions in the Q&A, but I encourage anyone who's joining us, if you have any questions, submit them in the Q&A or the chat. We'll get them answered. Eric, if there's anything you want to plug, anything you have coming up, or just any last words you want to say, feel free to share.
You could always check out Got Tech, the podcast. That's the podcast that Nick and I do at gottech.com. We do some blogs and some podcasts and some other stuff. We hand out a lot of free templates. We don't charge for anything. So make sure that you go over there. To Sean, Sarah, and Melanie from Friday and myself, make sure that you follow us on Twitter. I think they did an amazing job. We're also very different, and I enjoyed working with them in a panelist capacity. But make sure that you follow us. Everyone seems very genuine, and I'd be happy to answer any questions there, and I'm pretty sure that they probably would too. They're very active. So make sure that you follow us. And I just want to thank you and Brett for giving me an opportunity to come out and just, you know, talk and share. I enjoyed this. This was an awesome experience.
Well, good. I'm really glad that you could do it with us. Thank you so much for being willing to extend your engagement until today. I think this was really helpful for people on those kind of topics in particular. So we wish you all the best, and we'll definitely work with you in the future. It's been a joy. We'll link your Twitter, podcast, all of that when we post this recording. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you're watching this now, you're probably in our Facebook group already. So I encourage you to really keep up the engagement in there. If you have thoughts on digital equity, student engagement, other remote learning topics, please get the conversation started. We want that to be a channel for you all to engage with one another and create your own PLC or PLN that you can lean on throughout this process. So Eric, once again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.